it's not that there is an interpretation that's the problem. We're always engaged in interpretation, and it's always going to be selective. It's whether it's a more or less good interpretation. And there will be some authors in secondary literature that might be smarter than you or me, but they're not smart in a real sense. They're just clever. And sometimes they're able to have that appearance because they had a whole bunch of graduate students doing the work for them. You never quite know with a lot of these secondary authors until you look into them what their situation was. And so, some of them are not just interpretations, they're actually misinterpretations that are going to lead you astray. Good example of this is, so A.G. Grayling has a History of Philosophy out, big, thick book. And I was talking about this on the Hegel video that I did over the weekend. Grayling repeats that thesis, antithesis, synthesis thing. Here he clearly hasn't done like the real reading required to talk about people. His History of Philosophy is problematic for a lot of other reasons too. He gives very short shrift to women philosophers who we know are quite important, like Mary Wollstonecraft and Marge Cavendish and Anne Estelle. He'll talk about Simone de Beauvoir very briefly, but he's clearly he's coming at things from a particular angle, which is not just his own, but reflective of generations of getting things partly right, partly wrong. The Stoics are another prime example. Really, from the 19th century onward, there was this tendency to devalue Hellenistic and Roman philosophy by comparison to Plato and Aristotle, and say, well, the real philosophical stuff is there in Plato and Aristotle, the Stoics, the Epicureans, the skeptics, these Christian writers that are, eclectically appropriating them. None of them are really any good. They're all kind of, third rate. Well, that's a prevalent view that, you can find in Hegel and Heidegger and I would say Bertrand Russell and quite a few other people. And it's, if you read that and you you're like, well, the smart guy says this, so it must be true. Now you've got mistaken ideas about what's actually in the philosophies. And so it's sort of like the problem with translation. How do you know who's getting it right if you haven't read the primary stuff? I mean, you can rely on recommendations like, I often say, Friedrich Cobblestone, pretty reliable. He's sticking close to the original thinkers and their texts. There's a few places where I might quibble with him, but on the whole, I'm cool with people reading him. When people are like, well, what about Bertrand Russell's History of Philosophy? I'm like, well, I mean, it's going to be a lot of Russell and Russell's takes on things. And so I wouldn't rely on it too heavily. Or if people are like, well, what about William Durant and the Story of Philosophy? Don't rely on that at all, because it's mostly like, his own weird eccentric takes or wrong takes from other things. And he's got a strange way of arranging it. He, sometimes makes stuff up as far as I can tell, so there's all of that.